Hello everybody, Stefan Kessling from GrappleArts.com. Today I've got my friend Rob Bernacki, and we're going to be going over the top game. And Rob is the person that I know who's best able to explain Jiu-Jitsu in terms of posture, in terms of alignment, biomechanics, leverage, and the things that are supposed to be at the base of Jiu-Jitsu, not just wild athleticism. First question though, if we're doing the top game, why are you including guard passing and sort of top position, side mount,
Yep.
together instead of separating them out the way that most people do?
Great question, Stefan. Thank you. The reason we're doing that is because the concept that we're trying to portray about Jiu-Jitsu here is that Jiu-Jitsu is movement. For those of you that are fans of Conor McGregor or hate Conor McGregor, he makes a lot of noise about the idea of him being a student of human movement. And I might differ with him on some things, particularly his tattoo selection, but I definitely agree with him about the idea of being a student of human movement. And one of the things that compromised, in my opinion, my ability to learn and execute jiu-jitsu earlier on is I thought of the dominant top position, so the mount, the side mount, as static positions that I had to hold. And if somebody tried to escape out of side mount, I would just have to latch onto them, not let them move. Whereas guard passing is this dynamic thing where you're moving, you're transitioning, you're finally getting by the guard. It was what I used to view as a scramble. And so now that I have a better understanding of the mechanical principles behind controlling somebody to the point where you can pass their guard with movement, I also understand that holding top position is done with movement. It's not exclusively movement. Certainly there's a time and a place for crushing someone's head and pinning them in place. But at the same time, if I want to be good at the top position, I have to be willing to transition between dominant positions. And that all involves movement. So really, we're trying to focus in this volume on getting across the point that the top game is about transitional movement, whether it's to pass the guard, whether it's to achieve the mount, whether it's to deal with somebody attempting to escape the mount, whether it's to finally get into a point in the game, in the fight, in the match where we're submitting somebody. It's going to require human movement and control, actual control, intelligent control, not just I'm going to pin you down because I'm your big brother and I can hold your shoulders type control. Right, so the first concept we're going to address is the same concept that we addressed at the beginning of our bottom game volume, which is the idea of range management, range battles, and a little bit of grip theory. So range battles, as we talked about in the previous volume, are literally everything we do in Jiu-Jitsu. Every single movement is a range battle. Every time I fight for a grip and win, I've won a range battle, and that hopefully gives me the advantage that I need to pursue further on into my goal. Anytime I lose or there's a neutral situation, then I have to either back up or re-engage in a range battle so that I can go forward in a manner that's conducive to me being successful. I never want to attempt to advance if I've lost a range battle. When it comes to gripping, what we're trying to do is the same way that from the bottom, Stefan wants to get a grip on me, create a counterpoint, as we talked about earlier. So right now, this grip allows Stefan to stretch me out. He's breaking my alignment. So he's separated my structure, my posture, and my base is almost cosmetic at this point. The same thing goes for the top game. I want to use a counterpoint system to use grips along with that counterpoint system. So for instance, if I get a grip on the pants and I get a grip on the collar, and I'm able to separate the upper body from the lower body. So the goal in bottom game, grip counterpoint system is to separate my structure for the most part, getting my arms away from my body so that you can attack them. With top game, I'm trying to get your shoulders and your knees apart. I'm trying to access the space between your hip and your armpit, because all a guard pass really is occupying the space between the hip and the armpit.
Could you demonstrate what you're talking about with that, please?
Sure. So let's say I'm approaching a seated butterfly guard. I'm going to engage in a hand fight, because if I just try to reach in and grab you, you're going to get grips for free. So the first thing I'm going to try to do is win a hand fight. Then if I get a grip and a grip, I've created a counterpoint. I've got direct pressure and I've got lever-based pressure. I can either grab the pant leg or I can grab the ankle. Now I'm going to move using the momentum, the center of gravity shift of my body to create pressure, pinning you to the ground and accessing the lever to your hip to separate your knee-elbow connection that we talked about in the previous volume, give me access to the space between your hip and your armpit, and now I've completed a guard pass. Although it'll never be that easy in real life.
And when you're talking about range battles, are you, if in the context of passing the guard,
Yes.
are you always trying to come closer, or are you sometimes trying to go further away?
Occasionally you're going to want to go further away. Like if I find myself in the closed guard, going forward isn't really going to help me very much. So the range battles in this case are going to be mostly grip battles. If you can get a hold of my sleeve and pull my arm away from my body, you've won a significant grip battle. So I either have to grip break or I've got to anchor my hands, make sure that I've got good structure so that you can't pull my arms away. I want to make sure that I have good posture. So if you go to pull me forward, I should be able to absorb that. I don't know if it's obvious what I'm doing here, but as Stefan pulls me forward, my hips are elevating so that my shoulders can match my hips. If my shoulders come forward of my hips, then my posture is broken. I'm very easy to pull forward. So anytime somebody's pulling me forward in the guard, I want to use my hips to advance in this case. And then when I want to break the guard, I'm generally going to go backwards. So I'm going to have to break some grips, get my knee in. Now I've gone backwards, that sort of thing.
And then when you're passing the guard, then you're moving forward.
Then I'm moving forward, and then occasionally, and we're going to discuss this later on the volume, is I want to use a combination of moving forward and receding to get you to overcommit on your guard retention movements so that I can pass more effectively. At the higher level, guard passing rarely takes the form of a guard pass that succeeds. It generally takes the form of a lot of transitions that create an opening that you're able to exploit as the top person. So the first thing we want to address when it comes to some range battle ideas is the idea of approaching the seated guard. When we're approaching the seated guard, we're approaching, I guess the analogy would be a fortified position. We've got somebody that is choosing to play this type of guard, which means it's the type of guard they're most proficient with, as opposed to somebody who chooses to play flat on their back, which we'll address in a second. We're dealing with somebody who's probably going to be proficient. Butterfly guard, single leg X, that sort of thing. So if I attack this guard by just going, okay, that's, you're a butterfly guard guy, let me go into your butterfly guard and try to pass your butterfly guard, I've actually conceded the first range battle. We talked about in the previous volume the engagement phase. I just waved the white flag on the engagement phase. I allowed you to access your preferred guard. So Paul Schreiner, who's the assistant instructor at Marcelo Garcia's academy, has a great term for this, which is you want to pass the guard that your opponent doesn't want to play. So if you want to play seated, I want to put you on your back. If you're on your back, I either want to make sure that I don't allow you any grips or I force you to play a butterfly guard. So let's start with the butterfly guard. If I want you on your back, the first layer that I've got to always deal with is your hands. All right, so if I just try to reach in and grab you, you'll make grips as we discussed. So I'm going to approach the guard with good alignment on my part. If I come in like this, bent over with my hands forward, then my alignment's broken, I have poor posture, and my structure is non-existent. So I can choose to approach the guard either in a staggered stance or in a square stance, and there are going to be advantages to both. Square stance allows me to transition and pass to either side. If I approach with a staggered stance, then I'm pretty much saying I'm passing to one side. If I'm square stance, I can pass to either side. So depending on what configuration of the seated guard your partner is using, some people will sit guard like this. Some people will have one hand back for base. You may want to decide to approach with one side forward or still keep an even stance. Again, it's up to what kind of passing you know how to do. If you're good at transitioning side to side, this is probably your game. If you're just a guy who always passes to his left, this is probably your game. Either way, I want to engage in the hand fight first. So once I control the hands, let's assume that I've won the top kind of grip fight, I want to get his hands out of the way. Now the way I'm going to do that, rather than try to force the arms out, I'm going to drop my weight, which is going to give me access to your ankles and is going to put me in a good strong deadlift position. It's unlikely against a stronger opponent, so let's face it, that's why we all started jiu-jitsu, to beat up people that are bigger than us. It's unlikely that I'll just knock your hands out of the way. But if I can drop my weight down, utilizing my arms as frames, I'm going to be able to knock your hands out of the way, access your ankles, and dump you up on your back. That's kind of the first range battle that we always want to engage in when we approach the seated guard. If we can't win the hand fight here, usually we'll fake for the guillotine, drawing the hands, and then putting the person on their back that way. So those are the two most important range battles that you need to engage in when you're approaching the seated guard. Okay, now we want to cover the range battle that we're going to have when we attack the recumbent guard, or somebody just laying on their back, which you might call the prom night guard. If I go in and make pant grips, I'm again kind of conceding the engagement phase in the sense that Stefan can easily now make his sleeve grips and I'm caught up in whatever guard he wants to play. So I have two choices now. I can either choose to engage in passing the butterfly guard. If I'm good at passing the butterfly guard, rather than stepping forward with both feet, I'm going to come in, stuff his ankles down, and attempt to pass the butterfly guard. Which has two advantages. One, if you're starting by playing on your back, that probably means you don't want to play butterfly guard to start with. Two, even if you were a butterfly guard player and somehow I ended up getting you here and stuffed you down, this is not the place to play butterfly guard from. To play butterfly guard effectively, Stefan needs to be sitting up. That way he can actually access all his offense. If he's on his back, he pretty much is left with doing leg extensions with my entire body weight, which I don't know if you're feeling up to it, Stefan, but 180 pounds at the end, probably not. So if you have access to good butterfly guard passing, by all means, if you see somebody playing this style of guard, get a grip on the ankles, stuff the ankles down, pin your partner, and then work your passing from here. Alternately, and this is my preference because I don't have great butterfly guard passing, is I try to control the soles of the feet. And when I say range battle earlier, this is the longest range that he can fight me. It's the longest range that I can fight him, so it's the first range battle I should engage in, but it's also the one that he can't bring his hands to bear. If I grab his pants, he can reach my sleeves. If I grab the soles of his feet, he can't really reach my feet. So now I've won a range battle, and I can start to access different types of leg drags, which we can kind of go over in greater detail in the future, but this is another very important sort of range battle. I can also use this to tilt him upside down, start to go for double unders passes. Whatever style of passing you favor, you're going to be able to start with an advantage because you've won the first range battle. Right, so the first thing we're going to discuss now that we've covered what kind of range battles you need to engage in and win before you advance is the idea of sweep defense. Or you could call it sweep prevention, then sweep defense, and sweep recovery. Sweeps are the primary method of attack at a longer range from the guard. So if I'm all the way in your closed guard, yeah, maybe you can hit me with a triangle choke or hit me with an armbar if I take myself out of alignment, which we're going to discuss in a second. But if I'm approaching your guard, the first thing you're going to have the opportunity to do is sweep me. And if I don't know how to react to that, my ability to pass your guard is going to be pretty severely compromised because I'm constantly going to be running into sweeps. So what we want to cover is a little bit of a review for those of you who haven't had a chance to watch the previous volumes of the idea of alignment of base, posture, and structure, because in the same way that I'm not really vulnerable for you attacking me with a knife if I'm 10 feet away from you, I'm not really vulnerable for being swept if I have proper alignment. There is a notion in jiu-jitsu that people have of techniques, and a technique will work because I know the technique and you don't know the technique. I don't have to know what, let's say, a tripod sweep looks like or a waiter sweep looks like. If I'm in good base, good posture, and good structure, you shouldn't be able to execute the technique on me. So if we just have you start on your back for a second, Stefan. So I'm going to step into your guard, and you'll go ahead and establish whatever type of guard you want. So this is the tripod guard. Okay, so right now, I'm a little bit bent over. My posture's not quite right. I start pushing me. I'm not able to really absorb that too well because I don't have really great base right now. And you haven't attacked my arms yet, but if you did, you'd probably be able to separate my structure. So I have poor alignment at this point. So go ahead and sweep me. Drop me to my butt. Okay, so now let's try that again. And I'm going to approach your guard, and you're going to go ahead and try to tripod sweep me. Yeah. So just by slightly changing the position of my butt and my shoulders and approaching you with good base and good posture and good structure, I take that sweep away from you.
It's hard to get my feet into the right place, and even when they are, they don't feel powerful.
They don't feel powerful, exactly. And that's with me just kind of sitting there. Because you're now extending to get to me, I can start to attempt guard passes. So what we're going to be going over is kind of how to use proper alignment to deny the opportunity for a sweep. And then if a person attempts to sweep you, they're going to be overextending themselves. If they don't first deny at least one, preferably two, ideally all three of the ingredients of alignment, then they're going to be attacking somebody who's not in position or who isn't vulnerable to be attacked, and they're going to leave an opening. It's like me swinging a right hand at you from here, and then I miss. You're going to be able to knock me out afterwards. But if I set you up with a couple things and then I hit you with that right hand, then I'm going to be effective. So what we're trying to do is show you what the necessary steps are to prevent somebody from just catching you with a sweep because you don't know what that sweep looks like. You want to make sure that you're going forward with good alignment. Okay, so the first ingredient in alignment is base. Base we define as a platform from which to apply and absorb force. Most of the time that's going to be the ground. Occasionally it's going to be a couple of other surfaces. That's why we use the term platform rather than just your base is your contact with the ground. But in this case, because we're dealing with sweeps, I'm the guy on top. My base is my effective contact with the ground that's allowing me to absorb the force that my opponent is generating into me. That allows me to maintain, let's say, my balance. So if I'm on top, and we can go back to that tripod sweep example. Right now my leg is extended, so I don't have the ability to really change my positioning, my orientation relative to Stefan. If my legs are bent, now go ahead. I see how I can recede, absorbing that force, whereas if my leg is straight, I can't recede. I'm not able to absorb the force. So something as simple as my leg being in this position or in this position is going to change whether I actually have base or not. Anytime you can push into somebody powerfully or absorb them pushing into you and maintain your position, then you're in base. Posture is correct spinal alignment. The way that posture relates to sweeping is if you can pull my shoulders past my hips and my knees, then I'm going to start to lose balance. I'm going to have to start to plant my hands on the mat to recover my base. When I do that, you're going to have the opportunity of capturing my arms and sweeping me. So if I'm in your butterfly guard, let's say, and I start to lean forward, I have broken posture, and now I'm highly sweepable. If I go to approach your butterfly guard, but I've got good posture, and you go to pull me forward, it's not very easy. Structure is correct limb alignment. So I can use my limbs to perform the function of a frame or a lever, and sometimes a wedge, which is a type of frame. But in every case, structure is using my arms and legs with the least amount of muscular input and the greatest amount of skeletal stability support. So I, generally speaking, will use my arms as frames to support weight and as levers as force multipliers. So in the case of preventing sweeps, it's mostly going to mean me framing either against your body or against the ground. So if you again go to pull me forward and I can just kind of frame against you, this would be good structure. This would be bad structure because my elbows are flared out and you'll be able to just take me over no problem. Alternately, if let's say I'm on top of your X guard, for instance, good structure will be posting my hands on the mat. Bad structure in this case would be me latching onto you. A lot of people make this mistake. They grip to avoid sweeps. This helps very rarely. If I'm in the closed guard, it might help me. But most of the sweeping positions where somebody gets underneath my base require me to be able to constantly post my hands to defend sweeps. So latching onto somebody here, forget it. I'm about to do a horrible face plant. So I want good base. Let's say start moving me around. Now I'm recovering using my structure. My posture's okay. I'm posting my hands, and we'll go into this in a little bit greater detail later when we talk about active posting, but that would be good structure for me at this point. So base, posture, and structure are what comprise alignment, and good alignment is what's going to allow me to, 1, prevent you from attempting sweeps, 2, defend the sweeps as you attempt them if you manage to temporarily break my alignment, and 3, it's going to allow me to recover when you're farther into a sweep because I know what alignment looks like and how I need to get back to it. So So the next step in developing good sweep awareness, sweep defense, sweep recovery is understanding momentum and center of gravity. So if you haven't had a chance to watch the previous volume, we're just going to quickly review. Momentum is the term that defines a mass in motion. So my body is the mass. Once it starts to go into motion, it's creating momentum. There's a certain amount of transfer of mass that's going on. If I control that transfer, then I'm in good shape. If my opponent starts to control it, and I lose control of it, then I'm going to be out of shape. And center of gravity is the area of an object where the majority of the weight is distributed. So for the most part, that's going to be right around my belly button, but in some cases, as my shoulders pitch forward, it's going to start to move upwards in my torso. So if I control my center of gravity and my momentum, it's going to be very difficult for my opponent to sweep me. If I lose control of it, it's going to be very easy for my opponent to sweep me. And this might seem like a simple thing, but you'd be surprised how many people throw themselves forward when they're attempting to pass the guard. And this is the sort of thing that, in particular, people who transition from a wrestling background tend to have that just kind of dive in mentality, and they succeed against more beginner players because beginners don't use redirection of momentum as well as obviously more advanced players. And it could be argued that the essence of jiu-jitsu is the idea of what has been described by some people as using your opponent's force against you. And that really what you're talking about is transitions of momentum and center of gravity when we do that. When somebody charges at you and you sort of get out of the way and let them fall into a pit, you're using momentum and center of gravity at that point. So controlling my momentum and center of gravity is a critical element in moving forward into passing the guard. An example of this would be the butterfly guard. If I'm attempting to pass the butterfly guard and I get it in my head that I want to do this, I'm going to throw myself forward and load my weight up onto Stefan's butterfly hooks. So as I attempt to pass the guard, even right now, I'm already, even though I did that slowly, I'm already losing control of my own center of gravity and my own momentum. So it's important to, when you're dealing with forward movement in guard passing, to try to keep your weight over your hips if your only points of contact are your legs. If you have points of contact on the floor, it's fine with your hands. So if you have points of contact on the floor with your hands, it's fine for your shoulders to come past your knees. But unless you know that you can post on the floor without your opponent preventing it, because right now, I don't know for sure that I can post on the floor. If I try to pass your butterfly guard and I go like this, I may not be able to post on the floor. So we talked about range battles before. I haven't won the range battle that's going to enable me to post my hands yet. Your hands are up, my hands are up. If I just decide I'm going to post on the floor, I'm going for a ride. This is why we talk about everything is a range battle. Right now, if we have a bit of a hand fight here, and I get a grip on your collar and a grip on your hand, I start to move through to here. Now I can bring my weight forward because I've flattened you out. I've won the range battle. I controlled my center of gravity and my momentum through that movement. I never gave it to you to give you the opportunity to sweep me. That's one of the most important things about preventing sweeps while still being able to move forward, especially as a beginner in jiu-jitsu. People kind of don't know, when can I dive in, when can I not dive in? Rather than thinking about it as diving in or not diving in, think about it as your center of gravity, your momentum, where is it? And if you're going to distribute it forward, you have to make sure that you first win a range battle that enables you to plant your hands, whether it's on the ground, whether it's on your opponent, in a way that allows you to safely move forward without him being able to deny you posts. So now we're going to address the concept of momentum and center of gravity just from a standing position. So if I'm approaching Stefan's open guard and I don't engage in the range battles, if he gets a grip on my sleeve and he gets his feet on my hips, and I decide, you know what, let me come forward, I'm going to get embarrassed. I'm going to end up on Stefan's highlight reel on YouTube. So when I'm approaching the guard, as we talked about earlier in the range battle section, first, if I just get here, I mean, you're not putting your feet on my hips and you're not going to be able to sweep me. But if you do get to the point where you have sleeve grips, I've got to recognize that right now you can see my shoulders are forward of my hips and of my knees. So the most important thing for me to do here, one is anchor my hands. So I want to grip match. As we talked about in earlier volumes on gripping, if I don't anchor my hands, now my structure is broken. So I'm going to grip match and recede. So this would be the idea what we talked about in a range battle where I lost a range battle, so me coming forward is only going to get me swept. Because I know I lost the range battle, as quickly as I can, I want to anchor my hands, which changes my arms from being levers to becoming frames, and then I want to shift my center of gravity backwards to deny the momentum And then I can disengage and either attempt to pass or have another range battle and then attempt to pass. So again, it might seem really obvious to say, hey, don't just go forward into that type of sweep, but because you probably don't know every single sweep in the world, you can circumvent the long process of learning every single sweep in the world and knowing when not to go forward by just understanding momentum and center of gravity. And when you can see that your own momentum and center of gravity is not under your control, go back, reestablish control of your momentum and center of gravity, and then reinitiate your passing. Okay, the next ingredient in sweep prevention, defense, recovery is the idea of active posting. If any of you have had the privilege of watching Leandro Lo compete as a multiple-time world champion in a couple of different weight classes now, he's probably the most dynamic guard passer in the game today, and he extensively makes use of active posting. Conventionally, what a lot of people do when they approach the guard and somebody starts to get underneath them is they recede away, base down, grip strip, and then try to proceed from a more favorable position. What Leandro Lo kind of excels at is, if I can borrow a term from boxing, is fighting in the pocket. He hovers over his opponents, allows them the opportunity to try to sweep him, and then denies them the sweep with active posting. And then in the transition to that, he finds his guard passes. And that's something we're going to address later on. We're going to give you a drill in how to develop that skill. But for now, I'm just going to demonstrate what active posting looks like. So Stefan, if you can put me in a De La Riva guard. And let's assume that you got my collar, right? So normally here I'd be thinking, uh-oh, I'm out of position, let me start to back up, break grips. And again, that's not wrong, by all means go ahead and do that. But let's say you quickly pull me forward. This is active posting. So I immediately recompose my base. As my center of gravity shifted, I needed to make sure that my posts were on the mat. Now start kicking me over. Now I post with my foot. At some point, your leg is gonna extend enough that I manage to disengage, post my foot, and now I would drag my foot out, reset, you would go back to your guard again, and if we have enough exchanges like that, I'm counting on you to make enough of a mistake that I can exploit that and actually pass your guard in the process.
So, but it's not just a De La Riva thing.
No, it can be applied in any number of different guards. Even something as the deep half guard is actually another good example of that. If you start moving me around and you want to sweep me, I'm posting, I'm extending, start to move me around here, I'm shifting my base, bring me backwards. I'm just constantly making sure that my hands walk along the mat so that, again, what we referred to earlier, my center of gravity and my momentum are always under my control, or I'm regaining them once you gain control of them.
So then, the obvious question is, or how do you prevent people from controlling your sleeves to stop you from active posting?
Right. Well, the first way that you do that is you just approach the guard in a more upright manner. So whereas generally people... Leandro Lo, right. So whereas generally people will approach and try to make their grips right away, this is going to be a product of you either choosing to enter someone's guard, and again, this is a higher level skill. I don't expect anybody in their first few weeks or even few months of jiu-jitsu to be able to come in and just float over someone's guard while they try to sweep them. But the formula or the promise that I make everybody that trains at my academy is from day one, I'm teaching you to beat black belts. So part of that process occasionally is going to be learning things that you're not going to be good at right away, but that are going to set you up for success down the road. And active posting is one of those things. Not too many white belts are going to be killer with active posting, but if you don't start trying to learn active posting early on, the odds of you developing good active posting at purple belt, at brown belt, they're decreased. This is the sort of skill that it's the technical term for this is proprioception, which is the kind of your awareness of your body in space. Active posting is highly developed proprioception, so it's balancing around, making small adjustments with your hands and your feet, feeling where your balance is. So you can either choose to approach the guard with the knowledge in training that you're going to be developing active posting, or you can get very diligent at breaking sleeve grips. So we went over a little bit of grip breaking in previous volumes, but if let's say I'm in your De La Riva guard and you have sleeve grips on, which you're only generally going to have one. So at this point, I'm going to make sure that my main thing is to get a good punch break and then be ready to active post. Or alternately, if you do control one and start to pull me, then I'm going to post with one hand and really work on posting with my foot. So I can either kind of fight from a lesser position, or break the grip and fight from a more advantageous position. But either way, because of the nature of a lot of the sweeping style guards, your opponent is always going to have to commit one of his hands to some type of hip or lever control. So the odds of them being able to control both of your sleeves for any extended amount of time are reduced. And that gives you at least one post or one hand to fight the grip, to grip break, and then active post with both your hands. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other, but you should be able to do it either way. Okay, the next section we're going to go over is what we call denying levers. Now, in the bottom game or guard game volume, we talked about the idea of every sweeping guard being based on the principle of controlling the hip and the lever to the hip. So the lever to the hip is your leg, and there are a couple of ways that we can deny our opponent the access or the control to the lever to our hip. So Stefan, if I can get you on your back here and get you to put me in an X guard. So right now, you're controlling the lever to my hip on this side, which it's going to be a little bit tricky for me to free this one, although it is possible, by the way. If I can get enough of a grip here and break this grip, I can kind of step out. That's one way of denying the lever. But the more common and sort of the easier one to access is this foot right here, this hook. If I can get a grip on your toes and then start to push down, I'm able to deny you that lever control here. And then also if I can push down here and step out, I can deny you the lever to my hip that way. So any sweeping style guard where you're able to gain control of the lever to my hip, if I can just, I'm going to use active posting here. I'm going to get control at the end of the lever, so by your ankle, and I'm going to shift my weight backwards as I back step. And I've basically passed your guard in one movement at that point. Now that's more direct lever denial. A little bit more indirect is changing the orientation of my leg to change where the lever actually exists. So in the deep half guard, if Stefan gets like a foot hook exactly and starts to elevate me, if I turn my knee, changing the lever. So right now, if my leg is straight, that's the lever to my hip. But if I can change my hip orientation, then the knee becomes the lever to my hip. So I've used a change in angle at this point to deny you the lever to my hip.
Yeah, I'm lifting using that lever.
Exactly. And
And
I
all of
kind
a
of
sudden it goes
accelerate,
away.
and then the lever goes away. So those are both methods of denying our opponent a lever to our hip that fall under the rubric of either sweep prevention, sweep defense, sweep recovery. Okay, now sometimes you're going to be partway through a sweep. Somebody will have gotten your butt to touch the ground. You're going to be trying to recover your base and perform a technical stand-up. But you're going to find that your opponent is proficient enough in the concept of controlling the lever to the hip that you won't be able to withdraw your leg. At that point, you're going to perform what we call a base switch. So base switch is just going from one side of the technical stand-up to the other. So I'll just demonstrate that movement here. If I'm on this side trying to withdraw my leg, but I can't withdraw my right leg, I'm going to switch my base to the other side and withdraw my left leg. So a good example of this would be the tripod sweep. I've got my right foot forward, Stefan sweeps me. I'm trying to regain my base to get up, but I can't. I drive forward, switch my base, technical stand-up to that side. Now let's go over that on the other side. Again, my butt has hit the floor. I'm trying to stand up, but I can't. So I shift my weight forward, and I get my foot either onto the mat, or you notice how Stefan's elevating my foot here. I can actually step on him to perform this. This is why we say a base is a platform. So in this case, my opponent is going to be the platform. I'm going to withdraw and drive towards him and reestablish my base.
Yeah, it seems like I can hold your foot up when you're trying to pull it away, but I
No.
can't hold your foot up when you're trying to stand on it.
Exactly. So this is where the idea of frames and levers comes into play, which is jiu-jitsu is to a certain degree the art of changing frames into levers and levers into frames. So because you've accessed a lever, as I
I'm
attempt,
lifting your foot up.
you're lifting my foot up, exactly. You've accessed a lever, you're able to gain more purchase on controlling my hip. So if I try to withdraw, it activates that sort of mechanism. But if I drive forward, and you notice I start to shift my weight over top of it, it becomes a frame. So by pulling my weight away, I lighten my leg. By pushing forward and changing the angle, I'm able to change a lever into a frame, and that's what activates the effectiveness of this.
So this using the technical stand-up and then switching the side that you're doing it on, does it apply for any other sweep?
A bunch that I probably can't think of off the top of my head, but the butterfly sit-up sweep would be a good example. So if you manage to get control of my pant leg here and you push me backwards, if I try to stand up to this side, I can't do it, but if I switch my base, then I can stand up to the other side.
I mean, I still have your knee, but it's not a sweep.
Exactly, because as right now my leg is light because I'm withdrawing my hip. As I change my base and put weight over my ankle, shift my knee over my ankle, this goes from being a lever to becoming a frame. I'm able to technical stand up, and now I could counter you kind of with the same motion. Although I hate the word counter. The next movement we're going to go over is kind of a fun one, and it probably is the closest thing to the true definition of a counter, which is early on in a movement, you're going to have achieved the upper hand, and I'm going to respond with a movement that's going to enable me to regain the upper hand and deny you completion of a sweep and allow me to come back up on top. And it's called rolling through lever control. And what we mean by lever control is we're going to roll through the deep half guard and then back up on top. The main way you're going to do this is in response to a butterfly sweep, but there are a couple of other examples. So first, let's just go over that. So I've made an error. I've shifted my center of gravity forward, given it to Stefan. He starts to sweep me. Normally, this lever access is going to allow him to get on top. So what I'm going to do is recognize that he's accessed the lever on my body by using a frame on his body, and I'm going to change that frame on his body into a lever. So my hand is going to go in between Stefan's leg, and in some cases, if I'm able to, I'm going to fold both my hands in between Stefan's leg, but it's enough that I get one in there. So as he sweeps me, my right hand is going in between. I'm allowing myself to be swept. I'm rolling all the way through the deep half guard and coming up on top. And now I've moved into a more advantageous passing position. If we go through that motion once more, a little bit quicker this time, Stefan catches my triceps, I roll through, and end up on top.
So you're essentially keeping the leg that was between your legs. Because I would actually like to throw you and
Exactly.
free that.
Yes. So you're trying to kick me, do like a flipper kick,
Yeah.
and then deposit my weight on the other side of you, and I'm trying to attach myself to that leg to create a lever at the end.
Okay. So if you don't get my leg between your legs, this doesn't work.
Right, let's go over a different example, which is the scissor sweep. So if you scissor sweep me, and I just go to my back and grab your leg, then you're going to mount me. But if you scissor sweep me, and I manage to recede my hips, capture your ankle, and then pull you into the deep half guard, if you then continue to get up on top, I can use that to re-sweep you and gain the top position. Okay, the last thing we're going to cover, keyword being last, is establishing the guard when you know you're going to be swept. There are certain positions where you can kind of try to keep fighting, and you're going to end up getting either your back taken or something else, where if you had just decided, okay, you know what, I've lost this one, I'm going to go to my butt, I'm going to play my guard, you're going to end up at least cutting your losses. So a good example of this is the X guard. It's probably the best example of this. So Stefan gets me in an X guard, and I go to kind of face down, and he comes up into his technical stand-up, and you're going to see people who are doing this kind of thing, and in IBJJF, they're trying to get away from the edge of the mat, and then their partner's pulling them back. And if I continue to do this, 1, I can get leg locked. 2, I can get my back taken. 3, my hip really hurts right now. So the best play for me is to make sure that I just turn and immediately get grips and establish my guard. So this is one of those things that, again, it's important to distinguish between somebody making a threatening face at me and me going, ah, and establishing my guard right away, and somebody actually having me pretty much checkmated with a sweep. Another example of this would be the arm drag. So if I'm on top, and I get arm dragged, and I'm trying to still fight, someone's climbing to my back. The smarter play is for me to concede guard and play either butterfly guard or half guard or something like that.
It's better than having your back taken.
Better than having your back taken. The analogy that I give people is, I believe in the science of flight. If I'm on a plane, I'm not going to be looking to jump out of the plane. I'm going to be looking to ride the plane to the end. But at a certain point, if the engines catch fire, it's not time for me to start praying to Jesus. It's time for me to put on a parachute and jump. This would be the equivalent of that.
Is there an easy rule for people to follow when they should fight the sweep versus bail and go to the guard?
I mean, the heuristic for this is it's the end stage. If you cannot free the lever, is when I would tell you that you need to go to the guard. If I can free the lever, if I can switch my base, something like that. When I've gone through the other options, I've gone through options A, B, C. Plan F or G is I'm going to go to my guard. But definitely, it's not one of the first few options.
So we've covered range battles, like engaging in the first place. We've covered not getting swept by stupid stuff right off the bat.
Yep.
Now we're moving on to actually passing the guard and getting a dominant position. Is that?
Yes, we've survived the fiery plane crash. Our parachute has gotten us safely to the ground, and now we're going to pass the guard.
Okay.
So we're going to go through a couple of conceptual definitions for types of guard passes and how we can use combinations of these to pass the guard as we move on later. But the first thing we're going to do is define the first approach to passing the guard, which is hip and lever control. And again, hip and lever is a running theme throughout these volumes. It's one of the most important concepts, controlling the hip and the lever to the hip, whether it's for sweeping, for passing, for escaping positions. So in this case, again, we're passing the guard. So my goal is to establish control. Let's say I managed to scoop your legs up. I'm going to establish direct pressure on your hip, and this can come from gripping your belt or just placing my hand on your hip, and then direct pressure on the end of the lever to the hip. And once I've done that, there's a series of passes that you can attempt with this particular method of control. So why is hip and lever control important? If I only place my hand on Stefan's hip and don't control the lever to his hip, I want you to go ahead and hip escape for me, Stefan. Pretty easy to do. I don't really have the kind of power in my body until I do a cycle of steroids or 2 or 50 to pin a human being just by virtue of placing my hand on the floor. But as we discussed earlier in these volumes, a lever is a force multiplier. So even though I don't have the control with just one hand, if I can pin the lever to your hip to the ground, now go ahead and hip escape for me.
Much harder.
Very difficult. And certainly if you wanted to hip escape that way, it would be impossible. No. So I've done 2 things. 1, I've made it harder for you to hip escape, and 2, I've decided for you that the only direction you can hip escape is that way. So one of the things that we're trying to create, or one of the circumstances we're trying to create when we pass the guard, is a predictable reaction from our opponent. The more options that you have, the harder it is for me to react to those individual options. By accessing a lever to your hip, I make you go to one direction only to hip escape. So if I choose to react to that, it's going to be quicker for me.
So I only have one thing to do, so you can already have the response to that pre-programmed.
Exactly.
So you look like a super reaction god.
Exactly. This is a concept elucidated very well by Ryan Hall, is the idea that if I can predict your reaction, I can seem superhuman in my responses. It's not that I'm that fast, it's just that you only had one option. I knew what you were going to do. If I can predict what you're going to do, I can measure my response accordingly and seem infinitely faster than I would if my brain computer had to process 5 or 6 different things at the same time. Right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're going to go over 5, count them, 5 examples of this concept, the hip and lever concept, applied to a guard pass. And all of these are guard passes that you see at the highest level, black belt level of the World Championships, so you know they work. First one is going to be the Toreando, or a variation of the Toreando anyway, where I've established, again, I'm going to approach the guard in good base. Let's say I get my first range battle, I win this grip, I separate Stefan's legs, and I get into the hip and the lever to the hip. To pin the lever to the hip, what I'm going to look to do is, rather than push down on his knee, because don't let me do this right now, so yeah. Weirdly enough, my triceps is not stronger than Stefan's leg, but my entire body weight is. So that's how I'm going to affect this. I'm going to keep my right arm on his hip. I can use my elbow here to fence his leg out, because if I get too shallow, he can turn his knee in, exactly push me away. Or if he's a leg lasso player, Oh man, I'm gonna spend all day there. So I'm gonna fence this out with my elbow, put my body weight on the knee, and now I'm gonna redirect his knee and drop my shoulder on his midsection, stepping into hip control and passing the guard. Just one more time from this angle. I get my good control. I step in, maintaining good knee-elbow connection, fence his leg out, walk my body weight over his knee, and then I'm gonna shift from pushing down to pushing, or at least pushing down towards the floor. Now I'm gonna push down towards his feet, dropping my weight on his sternum. Now I'm doing this gently because I'm such a nice fellow, but in a situation where you were actually performing this, you'd be driving your shoulder into your partner's sternum, keeping your knees off the mat before you settle down into the final position.
So you spike him, take some of the wind out of him.
You want to see what he had for lunch at that point. Yeah, the next example we're going to use is called a knee overpass. So again, I can use a similar entry here where I've captured Stefan's feet, I've moved into this position, I start to bring this knee down, I'm going to slip my arm underneath and place my knee over his hip. So my shin is pinning the lever to his hip, my hip here and my arm accessing this lever is controlling the hip on this side. I'm now going to extend my body upwards, allowing his leg to slip by. This is one of those passes that against less flexible people will work really quickly. Against more flexible people, you're going to have to really pin their leg to their body. So I don't know quite how flexible Stefan is, but you'll notice I'm shucking his leg by. A common error here, and this goes back to alignment. Right now, I have base, I have posture, I have good structure. A lot of people make this error. They bend their head as they try to do this pass. Now push me away, Stefan. Yeah. I just need myself in the face. How good are you going to feel if that happens? But if I keep good, solid posture here, I should be able to just raise through to pass the guard. Okay, so from a different angle now, I've caught the soles of the feet. I start to move in. I start to pin the lever to Stefan's hip, and I place my hand on the mat for base. I'm driving my weight forward, making sure my right foot is in base as well. Again, common errors here. We mentioned earlier posture. Push me back now, Stefan. Oh, crap, what happened? I didn't have base. I didn't have effective base. I plant my right foot, now you can feel the difference. You're not moving me. I keep good posture. I shrug my shoulders, maintaining pressure. I find my underhook. My knees are off the mat, so I'm keeping all of my weight on you, but not overcommitting it. I have control of my center of gravity and my momentum, and I've finished my guard pass. A great example of this pass, made famous by world champion, multiple-time world champion, absolute division world champion, and all-around great guy, Bernardo Faria, is the over-unders pass. So if I'm a low passer and I manage to stuff Stefan's legs down and step in between, I'm going to be able to access this pass. I'm going to control his hip with an underhook and control the lever to his hip with an overhook. I'm going to bring my weight off the mat. Generally speaking, he's going to be trying to keep his legs in between my legs, so I need to find a way to break that alignment. You know, a common error here is people try to drive forward. What I actually want to do is extend my leg, accessing this lever. And you're going to have to get good at balancing here. Now, I'm going to move to the center, crushing that lever down, and I'm going to circle my foot out, placing my knee behind his leg, still controlling the levers to his hip, and making sure that I've got good pressure with my shoulder. Again, I'm being nice by not putting my shoulder in his sternum, in his solar plexus, but generally speaking, we'd be doing it like that. So, yeah, just so you know where to put your shoulder, this is not where it should be. It should be underneath Stefan's diaphragm. So once I've done that, I can move into my final passing position, secure the hips, and then fight to move up the body. Okay, so here's an example of how we could do this standing. I can be controlling, again, the soles of the feet and stepping into the pass right from there. I'm going to pinch my knees together. My opponent's always going to be trying to keep this knee outside to maintain a frame. So if I try to just kind of walk, take my leg out, I might get stuck. So I do this leg extension, accessing the lever, making sure my opponent's knee is underneath my belly button. I pinch my knees together again. I walk to the center, keeping all of my weight on my opponent. I circle my leg out, still keeping my weight on my opponent. I take my arm out, rotate his hips so I can access this underhook, and finish my guard pass.
So by hooking your leg, you're taking my leg and turning it into a better lever.
Exactly. At the point where your knee is in my way. This is a frame. You're framing my hip out with your thigh, with the femur. As I extend this, I'm able to get past your knee, accessing the lever, allowing me to
So you're taking my
control
frame and turning it into
a
a
lever.
great example of a frame into a lever.
Absolutely. Another way you can do this, and I believe this is the method that Bernardo favors, is just grabbing the pants and stuffing it down. It's a more direct way, and frankly one that I think requires a little bit more strength. And my arm trying to push your leg down is not going to have the same effect as me hamstring curling your leg. But they both work, obviously. Bernardo Faria has more than proven that that technique works. So kind of whatever works better for you. Again, one of the running themes of this series is that the individual details are sometimes going to change based on body type, based on athleticism, based on what feels better for you. But the underlying concepts, principles are what you're focusing on executing. All right, our fourth example of hip and lever-based guard passing is the leg drag. This is probably the most popular guard pass over the last couple of years. It's very dynamic. It's used by standing passers. The Mendes brothers are the best example of this. They have an excellent leg drag arsenal from any number of places. Couple of details I'm just going to go over on the leg drag. The sort of classical version 1.0 is to grab the pant leg here and then pull the leg by. And this is by no means wrong. This is a very successful method of utilizing the leg drag. But what we try to do, and what I've seen the Mendes brothers utilize more recently, is although they still use this, they do a lot of ankle control and pressure to set up a counter push on the part of their opponent. And not only that, if they don't get a counter push, by rolling the person up onto their shoulders, they're denying them a little bit of base and making it easier to access lever control. So in this case, I'm going to start with indirect lever control and then move to direct hip and lever control. And there are a couple of important footwork things that help this really work. What I'm going to start to do is move to one side, which is usually going to cause you to follow me. Exactly. And that's what I'm counting on. I want to, rather than standing in your guard and fairly obviously telling you, hey, I'm going to leg drag you, what I want to do is make you think I'm going to move around your guard and then drag you as you react. And you'll notice I've taken a deep step in with my right shin. This is controlling the lever to your hip right here. It's allowing me to push you in this direction. If I don't do that, if I just try to throw your legs by, you notice how easily you can react. But if I throw your legs by and step here, try to do the same thing, it's very difficult. And I can now move into lever and direct hip control to finish the leg drag pass. So one more time, if we can just do a slightly different angle, and I'm going to go over a little detail of what I'm doing with my left foot. So if I get this double ankle control, I start to move, I throw the leg by, I'm going to close my elbow in front of your thigh so that my armpit covers your knee. Because right now, you still have a frame in between us. So I'm controlling one lever, but here there's still a frame. So by bringing my shoulder and armpit in front of this, I've turned that into a lever as well. I'm now going to start to settle my knee down, and I want to get my head underneath your head to break your posture. But if you notice the way my foot is positioned, if I bring my foot close to my body, Stephanie, you could push me away, please. Oh yeah, that's pretty easy. But I'll get you to push me away now. No problem. Base, guys. Base is a platform from which to apply and absorb force. Right now, if I want to apply force, the fact that my foot is positioned here means that the only way I can generate force effectively is in that direction. I don't want to do that. I want to go in this direction. Also, the way that my opponent is going to generate force is going to be in this direction. My foot being posted this way matches a force vector going this way, not one going this way. So make sure to place my foot roughly 45-degree angle behind me. Now I can drive my head into you, or if you're pushing me away, I can prevent you from pushing me away. So little details like that are what make the difference between success and failure. Not you knowing a leg drag, but you understanding alignment throughout all of your guard passing movements. Okay, the next pass we're going to go over in this hip and lever theme is the double unders pass, which at first glance doesn't seem like it's a hip and lever control because usually you're just directly grabbing the hips, and there are a few different ways to do this. But what you'll also notice is my shoulders right now are behind Stefan's knees. So I am actually accessing the levers to his hip as I attach myself to his hip. So this is an example of a hip and lever based pass. So again, there are a few different ways of doing this. The sort of classical old school method I don't favor as much just because of the access to a lever here to the elbow push escape. So what we're going to do is go over a method that you see, I think Andre Galvao uses this, and Murilo Santana is maybe the best example of this style of passing, where rather than staying on the knees, what he does is he gets his weight forward off his knees to stack the opponent. And then we're going to make a frame here with our knee. We're going to posture through, pinning you, and then finishing the guard pass. So it's one of those things that really helped my game. I didn't used to have a lot of success with the double unders pass. And once I learned this method, it actually became something that I found a fair bit of success with.
So I suppose it doesn't matter, but in your example, you're doing a double under grip versus coming around both.
Yes.
both sides.
So in this example, I am gripping underneath the butt, although you can grip like this. I think, again, the method that I prefer to teach is one that avoids this alignment. This alignment is just bound to expose my elbow on some level, whereas this alignment can keep my elbow hidden. So I'm giving you proper framework as I turn to pass the guard, and also by bringing my knee forward. You notice I start to pin your knee, which is going to get into opposite corner rotational control, which is the next method that we're going to address. But this one kind of bridges the gap between the two methods. The initial part is a hip and lever, and then the next part actually becomes a rotational control type pass. So we're going to do this once from standing. I'm going to use sole control, drive in, get underneath Stefan's hips, get off my knees right away, trying to maintain the pressure as I walk my knee into his ribs, turning him over, sinking down onto his hip for the hip control, and establishing the guard pass from here. Right, so we just went over how to use the hip and lever methodology of passing the guard. Now we're going to go over using the opposite corner or rotational control methodology of passing the guard. And some of these are going to overlap, so the first example, we're going to give you 3 of them. First example is going to show you how you can move through hip and lever into opposite corner rotational control style passing. So that's going to be the knee cut pass. With the knee cut pass, once I've accessed the hip and the lever to the hip, I'm trying to cut my knee across. Now if I just cut my knee across and get to here, then I haven't initiated any opposite corner rotational control. You can just hip escape away from me and recompose your guard. So I'm looking to get to this shoulder. As I begin my knee cut, I'm going to find my underhook. If I can't find my underhook, it's okay. This is another kind of neat thing that Ryan Hall really exposed to me, which is I don't have to have an underhook. I just have to have a method of controlling this shoulder. For example, if you underhook me right now, and I don't have a method of controlling your shoulder, and I try to pass, I'm going to give up my back. But if you underhook me, and I have a method of controlling your shoulder, I can move into the guard pass even though you had an underhook. An underhook without the actual thing that it's enabling you to do is sort of useless. So having said that, it's better to have the underhook.
Right.
And then it's even better to have what we call a Pez dispenser. Pez dispenser, for those of you who don't know, who aren't ancient men like myself, is a little toy that allows you to dispense candy by raising the head. So a Pez dispenser is this. If I use a Pez dispenser on you, I'm going to have a much easier time pinning your shoulder. I'm going to be able to cut my knee through and finish my guard pass. So I'm using breaking someone's base, breaking their structure here, and then breaking their posture at the end with that Pez dispenser to help me in. Any style of sort of pressure-based pass as I move forward, tilting someone's chin backwards is highly advisable. So again, maybe I start with my sort of sole control, move in, walk to the side, get my Pez dispenser, get my underhook, and now I've got the lever to Stefan's hip, and I've got direct control of the shoulder. So there's my rotational control that allows me to move into my guard pass. All right, so the next example of a rotational opposite corner style guard pass, it's called a long step pass. Again, very popular recently, particularly utilized by the Mendez brothers. From the De La Riva guard, a couple things I need to address. One, as long as I've got a frame and a hook that's controlling the distance from my opponent, I'm not going to be successful. So I'm going to address these things. I'm going to either get a grip on the pant leg or a grip on the ankle. I'm going to look to catch a grip on my opponent's collar. When I get the grip on the collar, I'm going to step back, shedding the hook and accessing control here. In the gi, it's really favorable to get the pant leg grip here. I'm going to step back, and now I'm going to rotate my right knee over Stefan's knee. You notice how that accesses the lever to your hip. So I start to drop my knee down, bring my head to your head, bring my elbow to the mat, and I step out, controlling the opposite corners, lever control to your hip, direct control over your shoulder.
It would seem like I can turn in, but because you've got that knee.
Because I've got that lever, you can't. Let's do this from a slightly different angle. I get to here and here. I pop the grips off, long step through, and then drive you back into side control. The final example of this kind of opposite corner control is the X-Pass. This can be done with your opponent already on their back, or it can be done as part of a method of putting your opponent on their back from the seated butterfly guard. So someone's already on their back, and I manage to get a grip here, step over, and then kick my leg out. Again, I'm pinning directly on the shoulder, accessing the lever to the hip, and then settling down. If my partner was seated, I could do the same thing. I fight for grips. I get this collar, and I get this pant leg. I'm gonna punch, X-Pass, drop down into my guard pass. Okay, so one more time from a different angle, and we're just going to go through a couple of common errors in this position. Probably the most common error in the X-Pass is people don't kick their leg high enough, which allows their opponent to latch onto their leg in the half guard. This is particularly evident in the scenario where Stefan's in a seated butterfly guard. I start to go like this, I kind of kick, and then I get caught up. So that's the first one I want to avoid. The analogy that I usually give people is, imagine that there's a tall guy behind you, and you're trying to kick him in the nuts. Do that kick that way. Or a normal sized guy that you're trying to kick in the chest, but what's going to give you a better visual, really? So, Shaquille O'Neal is behind me. Oh no! Kick him in the nuts. And then I move into my pass. The other common error here is, especially with the movement-based one, is if I don't step my foot out wide enough, if I stay really close, let's just rotate slightly here. If I stay really close to Stefan's hip, and I attempt to do this pass, then when I kick, my center of gravity is going to shift out of my control, and I'm going to fall over. So it's important that, if we go back to this angle, as I'm pushing you over, I'm stepping out wide enough that I can kind of pause for a photograph in the middle of this, and then move into my guard pass and pause for another photograph. Okay, the final and the funnest version of this these guard passing movements is using submissions, in particular the Kimura and the guillotine, to pass the seated butterfly guard. This is something that still utilizes the concept of rotational control, except in this case it's not going to be opposite corner rotational control, it's going to be exclusively upper body rotational control. So if I can get you, Stefan, to accommodate me with some seated butterfly guard. If I'm standing, I'm going to use the Kimura. If I'm on my knees, I'm going to use the guillotine. So standing, I'm going to pick my right leg because I like the way it looks better. I'm going to step in between Stefan's legs. This is commonly going to lead to somebody either blocking me or trying to grip my leg exactly, which means that he's going to have to post that hand on the mat. Now sometimes before all this occurs, I'm actually going to win a grip fight right off the bat as I step in, and that's the method I recommend. But if for whatever reason I miss that, I'm going to be able to access a lever. So again, Stefan's got a frame, I'm accessing a lever. I can go to this side. My personal preference is to go to this side. So if I'm pushing him backwards, I know for a fact that hand is going to be on the mat or he's going to be on his back. Either way is good for me. So I keep pushing, pushing, pushing. I catch the grip. I'm now going to roll over my right shoulder, punch my hands straight. If I don't punch my hands straight, I'm not compromising Stefan's ability to get up. I haven't broken his structure. I haven't initiated rotational control. So I punch my hands straight towards his hip, raising his elbow as much as I can to internally rotate his shoulder. I'm going to rotate myself up, maintaining that internal rotation. So when I say rotate myself, I'm not necessarily rolling. I'm going to lift my hip and abduct my hips, making sure my feet get nice and wide. I maintain the integrity of my structure. If I bend my elbow now, same thing's going to happen. Stefan's going to turn into me. I'm going to lose the position. So I keep my elbows off the mat and I get onto my knees. Drive, drive, drive. I've now passed the guard. I can continue to attack the Kimura. I can use the Kimura to attack the back. I can transition to arm bars. I can transition to chokes. It's an all-you-can-eat buffet of suck for this guy because I started the initial guard pass with the Kimura control. So once again, from this angle, I'm stepping into my guard. I'm going to shed this kind of frame, create a lever, step drive in, catch the Kimura. I'm going to try to pull Stefan's hand this way as I go, and I'm rolling through, extending my legs, extending my arms at the same time. I turn, come up into base, making sure that Stefan's elbow continuously stays elevated, his shoulder stays internally rotated, and then I'm going to move into my guard pass.
It's that elbow being elevated that completely kills down my ability to turn.
Absolutely. It's the internal rotation. Again, that separating the elbow and internally rotating it is really critical in this position. All right, the other option here using submissions and upper body rotational control to pass the guard is the guillotine, or guillotine, depending on how pretentious you want to be. If I find myself on my knees and I'm having a hard time working through any of Stefan's defenses, if I can get an underhook with my left arm, it doesn't have to be a deep underhook, and hop my shoulder over his neck, catching a chin strap grip over here, I should be able to launch myself over and catch his elbow and his neck. So if you go to turn into me now, Stefan, can't be done. If you go to turn the other way, again, the lever to your shoulder is blocking it. I should be able to get up, finish my guard pass, and hopefully also finish the guillotine if I'm so inclined. Then you have to learn the details of finishing the guillotine for top, which is a topic for another day. Right, so the same thing from a slightly different angle here. Again, I'm on my knees, we're hand fighting. I do manage to slip my arm inside. I'm going to elevate, and you can post your foot if you need to do this. You can post your other foot if you need to do this. They're both fine. Since I'm going to throw myself to that side, it doesn't matter if I start elevating my center of gravity because I just need to get over Stefan's neck and head. The chin strap is me simply grabbing and cupping Stefan's chin with my hands. As I launch myself over, my, in this case, left foot, my far foot is going to back step into base. If Stefan starts to turn to his right, the fact that I'm controlling his chin should prevent that. If he goes to turn to his left, the underhook should prevent that. And then again, I perform a technical stand-up. And this is the most difficult one to do, by the way, because it's the least range of motion for my hips. But I elevate my hip, withdraw my leg into base, and come up on top of my guard pass.
So just a quick question, Rob. Sometimes you see people doing this with a full guillotine,
Yes.
or the guillotine, instead of the underhook. What are the advantages of doing underhook and chin strap versus the full guillotine?
The advantage is the rotational control. So if I just dive over you and you have, well, it's an arm-in guillotine, you do have the option of getting up into base in a way that's not as much under my control. So in that case, I have to be very good at diving over and rolling back on top into mount, or I have to be prepared to transition into the omoplata as you get on top. Both of which are kind of additional movements, which is why I prefer this method, although they're both effective. I wouldn't say that one is wrong or the other one's right. Right, so now that we've covered a couple of different types of passing movement, we want to discuss overall passing theory. And the idea behind passing theory in our system of jiu-jitsu is there are pinning style passes and then there are deflection style passes. And you want to alternate between those two, and then also between sort of adaptation passes that are going to occur as the result of your opponent using a guard retention movement. And that's something we're going to go over in the next chapter. But for now, I just want to address the idea that at the high level, you almost never see a guard pass work. And I would even argue at anything beyond the beginner level, beyond like sort of low blue belt, you're not going to just do a guard pass unless you're clearly superior to your training partner and have that pass work. What you want to use is a combination of, when we say pinning style passes, it's what most people call pressure passing, although in my estimation, you're always pressuring your opponent to some degree when you're passing, so I prefer to use the term pinning. When I'm pinning, I'm either pinning your hip or I'm pinning the lever to your hip, and then when I'm deflecting, I'm redirecting the levers to your hips. So by alternating between pinning you, like a simple example of this, Stefan, would be if I'm attempting a knee cut pass, and as I try to pin your leg, you give me feedback the other way, and then I use a deflection style X pass. So that would be an example of me attempting to pin you and then alternating into a deflection.
What about deflection into pinning?
So with the deflection into pinning, I might be trying to redirect your legs with a leg drag, and you withdraw your legs back, and then I move into a double under style pass. So now I'm pinning your hips.
Okay.
So that's the idea, is that at the high level, I have to give you a bad choice. I can't just say, hey, do you know how to counter the knee cut pass? Because you probably do if you're a black belt or if you're a white belt that's been training for more than 6 months. So I can't just say, roll the dice, hope you don't know the knee cut pass. I have to say, hey, I know you know the knee cut pass, and I know you're probably going to do this in response, so let me throw a deflection style pass at you, which means you're probably going to do some kind of guard retention movement, and that's where the next chapter is going to come into play, which is we're going to show you the most common guard retention movements and how you can pass based off of those. And that's kind of our overall passing theory is nobody at the high level does a guard pass and has it work. So we need to have a few different options that we're shooting at people from different angles and hoping we kill them at some point.
So then what about competitors like the aforementioned Bernardo Faria, who are known for a single guard pass?
Well, I would argue that even Bernardo Faria doesn't just use a guard pass. He uses the over-unders pass, but then transitions to the double-unders pass. And while he's attacking the over-unders pass, he threatens with the knee bar, or the dog bar, as it's called. And so he's still creating a multi-layered series of attacks that you have to respect one while you're defending that one, he transitions to the other. So I believe even though Bernardo Faria is a specialist, he still is a specialist in an overall approach to guard passing rather than just one guard pass.
A game.
A game,
a
yes.
small game.
Yep.
But they all still build on each other and support each other.
Exactly. Okay, we're going to talk about a drill right now that will hopefully help you put some of the concepts, ideas that we're talking about into place. This drill is called F Your Jiu-Jitsu. And the idea behind it is you can use it for a few different positions. We're going to use it in this case for guard passing, but you can use it for sweeping and you can use it for top control, which you'll see in some of our other volumes. And the idea behind it is when you go to roll, for the most part, you're going to have certain things that you're good at, certain things that you're not good at, and certain things that you're trying to develop. And the most contentious and difficult, I think, part of jiu-jitsu to develop is guard retention and guard passing. That's where the greatest amount of work gets done. And then again, being able to retain your guard, sweep from there, those are all difficult skills to develop. And the way you develop any skill is through repetition. So if we go to roll and I've got a guard pass and I'm good at it, and I know, let's say, Stefan's maybe not the greatest at stopping that one guard pass. Man, I want to get a win in this round. I'm going to hit you with my best guard pass. I'm going to pass your guard, and we're going to spend the rest of the round with me on top of side control trying to finish you. And how many reps did I get on attempting the guard pass? Exactly. And how many reps did you get on defending it? Now, one. One rep is not nearly enough. So what this drill does is it sets a parameter. In the case of the passing situation, and by the way, just where the term F your jiu-jitsu comes from is the idea that I don't respect your jiu-jitsu skills. I don't give a f about what you're going to do. I'm going to step forward, disregard anything that you're going to do. I'm going to throw myself, caution to the wind. I'm going to throw myself forward and see what you've got and then develop responses to it. So in the case of passing, I want to be able to practice as many guard passing transitions as possible. So if my opponent or my partner on the bottom grips me up, locks me into a half guard or locks me into a spider guard, and I'm just having a hard time fighting all those grips off, I'm not getting to practice my passing routes and my transitions and all the things that actually make passing effective. So my timing isn't being developed under live resistance. But if we introduce a restricted parameter, which in the case of jiu-jitsu for passing is the bottom person is not allowed to make grips, and they're not allowed to latch on to any specific type of guard. So basically, my guard, if I'm the bottom person, has to look like this. I'm not allowed to close the half guard. I'm not allowed to, pull you into X guard or anything like that. So I can't slow you down in any way. And what that offers me is the opportunity to constantly respond to your guard passing attempts. The top guy is allowed to do whatever he wants. The top guy can pass the guard in any fashion that he likes, make any grips that he likes. Bottom guy's not allowed to break grips and is not allowed to make grips. I can only frame and use hip escapes and movements like that, move high legs, all the different guard retention movements. And then you're going to practice transitioning from my guard retention movements into your guard passes, which is something we're going to cover again later in this volume. It does take a little bit of development to feel like you're smooth with it, to feel like you're doing it properly. At first, there's always going to be this tendency, because there's a restriction, to try to kind of game the system and maybe win. But the whole idea is there is actually a slight cooperative element to this, where if I recognize that I could probably like bully you over and over again with one type of pass because maybe you're not the best at doing the guard retention for it, I'm going to start using a different pass, and you're going to have an opportunity to develop different aspects of guard retention. So it's a very important drill that takes the overly competitive side of rolling away and allows us to still have a good back and forth exchange, and allows both of us, the top player and the bottom player, to develop a skill. So one of the important things to keep in mind when jiu-jitsu for passing is, once you've established your guard pass, you're not going to keep rolling. At that point, because we're doing an isolated situational sparring type drill, as soon as you get your guard pass and you settle it for a few seconds, you're going to go back into your opponent's guard and start with the process again. You're going to be moving live as fast as you like, getting your grips, attempting passes, and your partner's going to be forced to just perform guard retention movements. Again, welcome to my Academy Island Top Team, and Cal here is going to help me demonstrate your jiu-jitsu for passing. The rules for this are that the bottom person is not allowed to establish any definitive guards, so no gripping from the bottom, no clamping, no hooking so that I get stuck in place. If we end up in a half guard situation, a closed guard situation, or anything like that, we just reset and start again. Basically, he's playing an open guard from his back. I, as the top person, am allowed to make any grips I want, and I'm just running through my passing routes. This allows me to practice responding to guard retention movements, which are really the only things that he should be capable of under the parameters of this particular drill. So, a little bit. All right, so again, jiu-jitsu passing. It's ludicrous to think that just because you know a few guard passes, you're all of a sudden going to become a guard passing expert. The most critical skill in high-level guard passing is adaptiveness, adaptability, the ability to recognize a guard retention movement and then pass the guard based on that. As you proceed through chains of pinning style and deflection style passing that you learned earlier, you're going to see that your opponent is going to have predictable responses. So they're going to hip escape, they're going to high leg, they're going to do a couple of basic movements, they're going to frame, and that's going to allow you to predict that and then respond with an adaptive guard pass. And the movements that we're going to cover here can be used as guard passes or to finish guard passes, but they can also be used to a certain degree as top control movements once you've passed the guard. So we're going to go through a few of those movements right now. So the first example of this type of adaptive guard passing finish or guard passing movement is called a hip switch. And one of the most common scenarios for this is when you've almost passed the guard and your training partner, your opponent, is trying to catch you in the half guard. So Stephan, if I can get you on the back here. So if I've mostly passed the guard, but you're trying to capture my leg here, if I can cut my hip to the mat, and for some people call this a long step pass as well, if I can cut my hip to the mat, or even if I'm getting to a guard pass here and you're getting your knee in and I can turn and cut my hip to the mat, that's going to allow me to seal the guard pass, prevent you from putting me back into a half guard or a butterfly guard or something like that. This is a movement you can also use in top positions. Let's say I'm in like side control and I'm worried that you're going to hip escape away. I can cut my hip to the mat. In any of those examples, I'm just rotating from being on both knees to one hip to the mat. And then sometimes you'll even see people switch from one side all the way to the other side, which will happen occasionally in butterfly guard positions. So for example, if I'm attempting to pass the butterfly guard, I hip switch and then hip switch the other way. I'm able to walk to the other side of your butterfly guard. So the hip switch is a very useful adaptive guard passing movement. All right, the next movement we call a spin behind or a top spin if you prefer the Mendes brothers nomenclature. And this movement is going to be applied anytime we get relatively deep into a guard pass, but we make an error and our partner underhooks us and is coming up on a single or some style of wrestling. So in this case, I've started to knee cut through, but I gave up the underhook. So I'm going to top spin and end up on top of the turtle if my opponent is able to get all the way up. And then sometimes if I manage to do this quickly enough, I'll end up either with a back attack or a side control on the other side. It's really good to add this to any explosive knee cuts. One of the methods that I like to practice, if you can go any back for me, is reverse De La Riva guard. So we'll be here, I'll pop the leg back, I'll knee cut through, and then Stefan's gonna underhook me, and I'll immediately top spin to the back. Again, the idea being, I might be pretty effective with my knee cut pass, but sometimes I'm going to make mistakes. Sometimes my opponent's just going to be really sharp at certain defenses and is going to enable me, or is going to force me rather, to overcommit and come up on the underhook. And I'm going to have an adaptive response to their guard retention movement or offensive wrestling movement, and that's what this is. Okay, so let's go over this top spin or spin behind movement without a partner so you can see how the individual components break down. In this case, usually we're going to be in a knee cut style position. So my right knee, if my partner is on my right knee is down, and the underhook is coming up on my right armpit. I'm going to be looking to check that underhook by closing my elbow, start to push the head down. I'm going to step with my left foot. Now I'm going to transition from being right knee down and left knee up to being left knee down and right knee up. And here's where the spin comes into play. I'm going to be rotating on my knee as the axis. I'm going to be transitioning my left hand across, spinning into base. And if you want to come back up now with the left knee down, you can practice going the other way. So again, I'm going to be pushing the head down, checking the underhook, stepping with my right foot. I'm going to switch now. Left knee is down, right knee is up. Right knee is going to come down, left knee is going to come up. Right hand is going to transition as I spin back into position. So once again, right knee down, left knee up, spin, left knee down, right knee up, step, spin. Now that you've seen that, you can see the exact same movement with Stefan here. As he reaches for the underhook, I step over his head, drop my knee, spin around, and in this case I've ended up with him in side control on the other side. The next adaptive guard passing or transitional movement for top game that we're going to demonstrate is called a windshield wiper. It's probably the one I enjoy the most. It's the most fun because you do see a lot of very high level players occasionally kind of dance around lower level players, and this is the movement that they're using to do. So if you really invest the time into this transition, you're going to look hella slick. I recommend it. It's going to be utilized in a couple situations. The first one is when somebody high legs. So however, I was able to get here and induce Stefan to throw his leg over, and then I duck under and capture it. So let's just go over that aspect quickly. Stefan's goal is to bring this foot to bear on my shoulder or maybe my chest and then reset his guard. So because I know that, and once I get here, his most likely movement is the high leg, I'm going to duck under and catch his leg. I'm capturing his hip as well, and my shoulder is going to drive forward, creating a little bit of tension on that lever. Now my right knee is going to post up, and I'm pinning his left leg to the mat here. So you can see I want to back up to increase the pressure and then drop my knee to the mat, removing my hand, posting it on the mat, and now I'm going to perform the windshield wiper. My left foot, is going to cover where my right foot was. I'm going at the same time move into the other side. And then you can do a continuous motion drill. Stefan will do the same thing. Throw the high leg, I'll back up, windshield wiper this side, he'll throw the high leg, I'll back up, windshield wiper this side, high leg. And you'll notice I back up every time. It's really important that I don't catch his hip here and then try to go over his leg because I'm gonna run into a frame. I have to back up to use the lever to his hip, to turn his hip down, thereby pinning his knee. If his hip is in this orientation, most likely his knee will be here, and you're going to be trying to run around a frame, which is not going to work. So once I realize I'm doing that, and I don't want to keep going, I'm going to catch the ankle or the knee, I back up, pin the leg, windshield wiper over. Really important detail.
So ideally, I'm getting, from my point of view, I'm getting my foot on your shoulder.
Yes.
So you're preempting that and
Exactly.
ducking under it, not letting me get my foot on your shoulder.
That's right. This movement can also be used when you're hip escaping away. So if I'm kind of almost past your guard, you start to hip escape, I can pin your knee, windshield wiper over to this side. Again, you do the same thing. I pin your knee, windshield wiper over to this side. And you'll also see people do this from here as someone hip escapes away. They transition to the other side. Very, very useful movement. We do it all the time from the mount to knee on belly, back to the other side. But it's most effective in the middle of a guard passing, guard retention scenario. Okay, so here is the windshield wiper movement, just without a partner there. I'm going to start with my, in this case, left knee up. I'm pinning at the knee joint. I'm going to slide my left knee down, making sure that I keep my left foot over top of the ankle as I start to engage my right foot, and I want to switch. So I'm always switching at the same time, so I'm not going one and then leaving this leg free to capture me in the half guard. It's at the same time, simultaneous 1, 2, and you can see how that resembles a windshield wiper. And I'd just like to thank Husamar Paul Harris for lending me one of the many legs in his collection for this demonstration. Okay, our penultimate adaptive guard passing top game sort of movement is called the hop. And this is going to occur whenever my head is being pushed away, and I'm going to change that sort of frame or lever into a frame and use it as a post for me to hop my body to the other side of my partner. So Stefan's on his back, and let's say I'm passing to the right, maybe I'm knee cutting, and he starts to push my head away. Right now, this is a frame, so if I try to push into it, nothing's going to happen. So as he continues to access the lever of my spine, he's going to be able to get into base, and then hip escapes, and now he's going to reset his guard, and I've failed in my passing attempt. So as soon as somebody initiates this kind of frame-based defense, I'm going to want to put my head down and then hop to the far side of his body. And you can see as I do that, I change the the lever of my spine into a frame, and I change the frame of his arm into a lever. So one more time, I'm knee cutting, he pushes me away, I put my head down, this leg comes up, I'm posting all my weight on my head. It's important that I don't hop both my legs over, but I want to transition one leg first, because I need to clear his potential half guard attempt here, and then kick the other leg over, and then settle my weight down as I go. And again, you can turn this into a movement drill where Stefan now pushes my head away, I put it down, hop over to the other side, does the same thing again, I hop over to the other side.
So I know right now there are some people out there going, this is way too athletic for me. Look at him, he's leaping through the air, balancing on his head. I'm not a breakdancer, I can't do this. Discuss.
I'm also not a breakdancer, therefore I shouldn't be able to do this. So there isn't a tremendous athletic component. As the saying goes, jiu-jitsu is for everybody, and we really try to follow that in our system. So I'm posting my head and both my hands and both my feet, and then I'm just raising one leg in the air. So if you have the coordination to do this, then you can do it. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 posts right now, and I'm just transitioning from one side to the other. I mean, I wouldn't recommend doing this for an hour. You'd probably get a head rush, but this is not requiring, as you can see, I'm carrying on a conversation while I'm doing this. It's not that big of a deal athletically. We've come to the end of our list of strategies for dealing with people who don't want to get their guard passed and how to deal with it in an adaptive fashion. This last movement we call the Cobra. because we have to have an imaginative name. And it works against people who utilize a lot of inversions, Granby, half Granby type movements. So if, Stephanie, you can oblige me with a Granby, if I manage to push your legs and you turn away, normally you would be half Granbying and recomposing your guard. This can be very frustrating, especially against lighter weight fighters who are very flexible and constantly Granby away from you, particularly if you're a standing passer, you attempt a leg drag, they Granby away from you. This is a good transition to deal with that. So if I push your leg away and you start to Granby, I'm going to recede and bring my head back in. So kind of the same way that, a cobra moves its head around and then strikes, that's what I'm doing. I'm forward, I go backwards, and then forwards again. I push you to the side, you go to Granby, I back up, come back in, and then immediately appear on the other side of your hips like magic. One more time from a different angle. Stefan Granby's away, I recede, drive my head back in, and finish the guard pass. So from standing, if Stefan's on his back, let's say, I attempt some sort of leg drag, I drop underneath and appear on the other side.
So you have enough experience to know when the guy starts turning away, he's probably going to Granby.
Exactly.
So then you just immediately start changing levels to go down.
This is one of the bits of timing and skill that you're going to develop using the aforementioned jiu-jitsu drill for passing, because you're going to recognize after a certain amount of reps when somebody is going to be pretty much forced to or most likely to employ the turn away Granby. So you woke up one morning and you found that you passed someone's guard. What are you going to do next? You're going to use some top control theory, which we're going to share with you right now. Again, as I mentioned in the past, when I was training, my only conception of top control was I got to mount or I got to side mount, I got to hold on for dear life and make sure this person doesn't move. I've come to understand that that's not how it's supposed to go, although I certainly am supposed to try to keep you in place. At a certain point, you're going to be able to affect movement. And there are two movements in general that you're going to utilize, the hip escape to sort of regard, and then getting into base to technical stand-up. So because I know that, those are the two movements that you're going to utilize, and because I know that you have to utilize a series of frames to do this, my top control is going to be based around the idea that if I can hold you in place, great, but if you are able to initiate movement, I can match and defeat your movement for a couple of reasons. One, I have superior mobility. If I'm on top, I can get to my feet, I can move around, I can transition side to side. You're still on your back. Two, because you're posting your hands and trying to create frames, I know that by using the frame lever theory, I can change your frames into levers and control you that way. So the concept that we usually use here, we call staying behind the defense. So your legs are your defense, I got behind your defense, I just need to stay behind your defense. If I'm in mount and you start to move around, I can transition to knee on belly. If I'm in knee on belly and you keep moving, I can drop back down to side mount. It's not incumbent on me to stay put. As long as you're moving, I know I can move better than you, and what we're going to go through is some basic concepts, some basic control schemes using frames, levers, movement transitions to stay behind your opponent's defense and make sure you can always stay on top once you've passed the guard, to stay behind your opponent's defense, stay outside of his guard, stay dominant, and either maintain top position or take the back. Okay, the first thing we're going to discuss when we talk about sealing the guard pass or maintaining top control is that it's important that you recognize what the stages along the way are to full side control. Because just because I've beat your legs doesn't mean that I've actually got a full guard pass. There is a way station, what we call a checkpoint, or what Braulio Estima calls a checkpoint, so who am I to call it anything else? Braulio Estima terms the checkpoint where I make sure that I get dominance of your hips before I move up the body and attempt to gain dominance of your shoulders. So Stefan, if I can get you on the bottom of side control here, like this. So normally, if I just passed your guard and I tried to grab your head, you might bring your arms into play and now hip escape, and then I'm back in your guard. So that's an important step that I've skipped, which is I beat your legs, but I didn't settle your hips down. So the checkpoint is where I'm stopping. And don't get me wrong, if your arms are totally out of the way, I'm going to cross-face the crap out of you. But if you're a good opponent, and as I've mentioned before at my academy, my promise to you is I'm teaching you from day one to beat black belts. So I don't care about people who flail their arms about. They can go do Sistema again. We're going to make sure we deal with guys with good structure. So his legs are the levers to his hips. I'm gonna walk into that lever, make sure that I settle his hip down before I advance any further. That's the checkpoint. Anytime I find myself passing the guard, if I've got somebody who's aligned properly towards me, I slide my knee under his butt, making sure I'm corralling his hip on this side, and I walk into his hip, thereby breaking his base and giving me access to this lever. This is my checkpoint. I need to get here every time I pass the guard against somebody good. So again, from this angle, I've passed the legs, I've beat the knees, I'm onto the hips. I'm gonna shift my knee inside, rotate your legs the opposite way, and make sure that I've broken your base before I advance. So you'll see some people utilize what I believe is called Kuzuri Keisagatami and use their butt to do this. So they'll find themselves here and they'll walk their butt back into the levers to the hips to turn their partner the other way. That's a similar expression of the same idea. So one more expression of the checkpoint idea is you'll find this, especially with longer limbed and flexible grapplers, is they'll try to capture your leg here and pull you into the half guard. So anytime I find myself in this position, I see someone reaching across, I'm actually just going to step my knee back in, and if you can try to capture my leg here.
Not a chance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't reckon there are too many human beings with the necessary flexibility to capture my leg when my butt is touching my heel. So this should leave us in a pretty safe position, and then we can move back into position. And then again, if I feel somebody going for that, I just put my knee back in, staple the leg. So this is another checkpoint that we use with, again, flexible half guard type players.
But you're not going into half guard.
Definitely not. No, I'm stapling the leg. The distinction is if I were to put my leg all the way over, now I'm going into half guard. What I'm doing is recognizing that for my leg to end up caught in the half guard, it has to go in between your legs. And if you manage to hook my heel, you're accessing the lever to my knee, which is going to turn my hip, which doesn't just put me in the half guard, it puts me in like the Lucas Lech style half guard, where this lever acts as a ratchet, and now you're going to be able to effectively sweep me. So I'm not going into the half guard, I'm placing my knee over top, stapling your thigh, your femur to the mat, and making sure that my heel is touching my butt. So if I go up like this, you might still, if you're extremely flexible, somehow be able to catch me. It's a long shot, but there's no shot if my heel is touching my butt. Our next concept in the top control theory section is what we call control the toes. And this is just another expression of the lever theory. But one of the most common reguards that you're going to see is somebody hip escaping and then bringing their knee inside to block your hip. So if I got partway to side control and Stefan hip escaped, brought his knee in, exactly, he's now created a frame, again with his femur, and I'm going to want to change that frame into a lever. But the problem with this, if I can just get you to drop your legs, if I grab your ankle and I try to push it, I want you to resist me, don't let me move your leg. It's really, really difficult for my triceps, my arm, to overcome someone's leg in this case, for a couple of reasons. One, your leg is bigger and stronger than my arm, but two, you're in proper alignment and your kinetic chain, all of your muscles are working together. If, however, rather than trying to press against your ankle, I decide to go against your toes, now I want you to try to keep me from moving your legs, Stefan. It's remarkably different how much more power you have. And it's not so much that I have more power, because I don't. It's just that I'm weakening you structurally, making you unable to resist what I'm doing. So by curling the toes, I break the kinetic chain. Now your leg's no longer able to try to do a leg extension now.
No way.
It's impossible. So I've done that, but now I've also created a lever control to your hip. So if I've got some sort of control of your collar, or I've got some sort of crossface and you've got your knee back in, I should just be able to return you back into position. And again, you can hip escape, get your knee back in. I'm still holding on to your upper body, creating a point of control at your shoulders. So I'm going to affect rotational control. I grab your toes and I just reset you back into side control. Extremely powerful concept, again, recognizing that the end of the lever is the point of greatest mechanical advantage. And by trying to grab somebody at the ankle, I'm not utilizing a lever that I could be utilizing to gain greater control over my opponent.
Are there any other positions on top when you're going to be controlling the foot like that?
Some passing positions, occasionally, for instance, if I'm in De La Riva guard and I'm trying to stuff your ankle down here and just kind of, you can resist me. But if I go to the toes, I can get greater control. This can also set up leg drags. very well. Yeah, there are a few examples, but by far the most common and the best one to be good at is when someone hip escapes and puts their knee back in. Okay, our next concept is the idea of blocking the hip, and how this gets done is less important than that it gets done. So you can use any part of your body pretty much to block your opponent's hip to maintain dominant top position. So if I can get step back here, again, the common movements that you're going to see here to recompose some sort of guard style is generally going to be a hip escape. So when we block the hip, we showed the checkpoint, which allows us to secure the hip. But once I've moved past the checkpoint, if for whatever reason I don't get to a fully dominant crossface and my partner gets his hands in, the next step from this is some kind of hip escape. So in this case, I'm going to use my hand to block the hip. So all I've done is place my hand right down by Stefan's hip. I'm going to bring my other hand to his hip over here, and I can walk into north-south, or I can stay put. The next example of this would be as Stefan hip escapes, is I'm just going to place my shin or my foot against his hip. So I could elect to go into knee on belly, or I could just place my foot here, place my hand here, and block his hip in. Another example of this might be as he hip escapes away, I'll put my head down and block his hip and make sure he doesn't recompose his guard. And then all I need to do is make sure that I push him back onto his back, get this kind of opposite corner control, and then move back in to side control on this side. So it really doesn't matter. It can be, for instance, my hand, it can be my elbow, it can be my head, it can be my foot, it can be my knee, it can be my shin. Just be aware that as your partner is bridging, hip escaping, moving around, whichever part of your body happens to block his hip from escaping away or block his hip so that he can't put his knee back in, any one of those is suitable. It's going to get the job done. Don't be obsessed with side control looks like this or side control looks like this. It can look like anything. It can transition into north-south. It can be knee on belly. It can be pseudo knee on belly. It can be reverse knee on belly. I can go from here to here and block your hip. Anything I'm doing that prevents you from getting your leg back in between us is suitable. For instance, this configuration is worth 0 points in an IBJJF context, but it's me about to heel hook Stefan in a more open rule set. So it doesn't really matter how you achieve this control, it just matters that you achieve it, and recognize that you can be fluid and smooth and adaptable and be moving around constantly but still maintaining dominant position and staying behind the defense.
So when you do finally move up to the head and you really solidify that crossface and you really solidify that underhook, if that's the position you're going for,
Yeah.
do you have to pay as much attention to the hip at that point?
No, not really. Once you've utilized a good crossface, you manage to twist your opponent's spine up so you're breaking their posture. You're making it very, very difficult for them to re-guard. I don't say you can ignore it, but you can certainly worry about it a lot less. Most of the time, just having your hand kind of there is enough. But once you get into a deep crossface, I mean, you've experienced this before. Against a good player, your odds of escaping are pretty minimal. Okay, so again, from a different angle, we want to keep in mind that our opponent's goal is for their hips to recede and their knee to come in. As their knee comes in, they're going to be able to reestablish a frame. So whether I plant my hand here to prevent that from happening, whether I plant my shin here to prevent that from happening, I put my head here to prevent that from happening, I can put my butt here to prevent that from happening. It doesn't really matter how you do it. You can be as creative as you want given the limitations of the alignment of a human body. But as long as you achieve that goal of blocking the hip and preventing the knee from coming in, you'll be able to maintain dominant position. All right, our next concept with top control is the idea of levers to the hip and levers to the shoulder. We're going to cover levers to the hip first. Kind of a technique that you see, or a position that you see pretty commonly, is people are going to try to defend the mount by putting their foot like this and setting a frame. Here's why that's not such a great idea. If Stefan posts his knee up here and I'm trying to mount him, yes, this does serve as a block for the mount, but in much the same way that we've talked about in the past, changing frames to levers, all I have to do is this. This is not really a good frame. One of the biggest mistakes you can make with your legs is connecting them both together. For instance, if I was trying to pass Stefan's guard and he decided to do this, that would not be a very effective guard. We want our legs to move independently of one another so they can constantly recompose, frames, hooks, all the different, clamps, all the different types of guard that we talked about in the previous volume. And the same thing exists here. If Stefan just keeps his leg a little bit independently and bases, it's really, really hard, for me to push him across. But as soon as he connects his legs, I can push him right over. So this is something that we want to be able to recognize, is when is somebody giving me the lever to their hip, and it's a very common scenario for that. I'm going to just lace my hand through, I can cup the thigh here, and just bringing my shoulder forward is enough to rotate my partner out of base. So giving me the lever to the hip is going to be a pretty serious error. Not everyone's going to do this, however. A lot of people are going to keep their feet planted like this. In this case, what I'm going to do is reach into the shin and rotate my partner this way, or reach into the shin here, pull him out of base, rotate him that way. Anytime I need to access the lever to the hip to take my partner out of base, that's the method that I'm going to employ. So from a different angle, again, we've got the first option where my partner has elected to do this. I weave my hand through, I'm cupping the thigh, I'm driving forward with my shoulder to rotate. My partner elects to not do this. I'm going to reach in, grab the ankle. Again, I'm driving my shoulder forward to access the lever, and I can do the same thing, reaching through here, pulling his foot off the mat, driving him forward to access the lever. Any one of those methods is an excellent way of taking our opponent or partner out of base. Our next concept in the Top Control series is the idea of the lever to the shoulder. So as we mentioned earlier, the two options that people are going to usually utilize to defend themselves from negative positions is first hip escaping and trying to get your knee back in. Second is coming up on an underhook and attempting to go to either a half guard style of attack or a wrestling based style of attack. So when they do that, they're going to create potentially frames, but we're going to try to turn them into levers, in this case to the shoulder. So Stefan, if you're on your back and I've passed your guard, once you start to get the underhook, that's the first lever. So right now you're displacing me, but if I can immediately close my elbow and bring my body onto the end of the lever, I'm going to access the lever to your shoulder, and now I can just pretty much push you back over because you haven't been able to get into the base. So that's the first lever. Second one is if you do get all the way up to your elbow, I want to try to make sure that I remove this post. Now if I try to just pull directly, that's probably not going to work, but if I cup the end of the lever, again the elbow where it meets the mat, and I keep my head down using this Pez dispenser effect, I'm going to be able to push you back into position. It's important though when I do this that I don't allow you to break my structure. Like right now trying to do that is going to get my back taken. So I want to make sure that if you do get your underhook, that I kill this lever first, and if you still happen to get to your base, I drive my head underneath your chin, cup your elbow, bring you back into position, and I don't advance forward. I don't come up here because I'm still giving you access to now the lever to my hip. So by being a little bit more judicious, again, with your momentum and your center of gravity, never giving it to your partner, making sure it's under your control, and then accessing the lever to the shoulder and the lever to the shoulder, you can continue to maintain top control even though your partner is doing the correct things to escape.
So how would you advance up to the head, if that's your goal, after collapsing me back? Just more methodically?
So let's just, what I want to do is if I have, so let's say I've closed my elbow, I've popped you back down. I want to make sure that first I pin this shoulder to the mat, then I repummel my underhook. A common error here is to attempt to repummel now, and then you win the pummeling battle, and then continue to fight back to your feet. If I've managed to shut this lever down before I advance, I can either use my head, use my hand, or use the Pez dispenser effect here to pin you before I repummel my underhook. Okay, our final concept in the top control movements is going to be utilizing the knee on belly as a hub. So conversely, when you see knee on belly utilized most of the time, particularly in IBJJF, it's used to gain 2 points, but you can also use it just to pin somebody, grind them down. If you're training in the gym, what we actually want to use it for is a way to generate movement, which is not something you associate with knee on belly. You associate it with crushing somebody. But if you're dealing with a partner or an opponent who is staying really tight on the bottom of side control or staying really tight on the bottom of mount and not allowing you a lot of offense, you can transition to the knee on belly, giving them sort of the glimmer of hope that they're going to be able to escape, and then use transitional movements as they attempt to escape the knee on belly to create submission attempts, to open them up for back takes, that sort of thing. So if I find myself in side control and Stefan's just being, Mr. taking my ball and going home and just not wanting to give me anything, I'm going to move into the knee on belly with a very light type of control. Like, I'm not grabbing his lapel, I'm not trying to grind my knee into him or anything like that. I'm just resting my shin across his hip. Important detail here, my foot is glued to his hip. I'm not putting my foot on the mat and then putting my knee on him. I'm resting on his hip, which is going to allow me to perceive his movement much better, and it's also going to increase the pressure. Like, if I did want to do this in a jerky fashion, I'd want to be able to apply more pressure because my weight is entirely on him rather than resting my foot on the mat. So I'm keeping my foot right here. What this is also going to enable me to do is drive back into the lever to his hip if I ever need to. So now that I'm here, Stefan starts to sort of move around and bridge. I can windshield wiper to the other side, and now you can see I've exposed Stefan's arm temporarily. But I can come back to the hub here. Maybe he pushes on my knee, which allows me to start feeding my collar chokes. Right? He also might make the mistake of exposing his elbow, which will allow me to attack the arm bar. So anytime you're dealing with a really defensive, shelled-up player, this is a great option if you have developed the windshield wiper movement and, start to turn into me a little bit, please, the spin behind movement. Either of those movements, when somebody turns into you from the knee on belly, will enable you to expose either their arm or their back and just frankly frustrate the crap out of them. It doesn't feel nice to have somebody dancing around you from one side to the other while you're doing your best to escape a negative position. That sort of frustration does lead to mental lapses and can enable you to take advantage of that if you're the top player. Okay, so once again, from a different angle, I found myself in a side control and my partner's not being very cooperative, at least in the sense of trying to escape. So I move into the knee on belly, I rest my weight. As my partner starts to move bridge, I can windshield wiper across, he turns into me, I can windshield wiper back across again. As he turns into me, I can step, spin behind, I can step, spin behind. And every time I do that, I'm exposing his back, and hopefully he'll stick his elbow out enough that I can either get to some kind of Kimura control, arm triangle choke, arm bar, whatever. And if he doesn't, then I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm going to go back and forth, dance around on him, and make him feel miserable for taking his ball and going home. So you've passed your opponent's guard, you're on the top of side control, and you haven't done a lot of reps to do these transitional movements. How are you going to get these reps in actual rolling without your partner escaping? I'm glad you asked. If you've been paying attention, you know this drill is called your Jiu-Jitsu. In this case, your Jiu-Jitsu top control. So the limitation here is, and again, we're following the idea behind your Jiu-Jitsu drills, that the best way to develop skill in Jiu-Jitsu is with reps, and the best way to develop reps is actually in live movement. So live movement allows our opponent to perform a set of realistic escapes, what they would normally be doing when they were rolling, but puts a limitation on us. And that limitation forces us to develop the skills that we're trying to develop with transitions, with movement, rather than latching on. So obviously if I pass your guard in a normal round and I get to side control and I just want to hold you down, I can certainly do it. I can just grab a good crossface underhook and keep you there for the rest of the round. That doesn't get me any better at side control. It might give you a little bit of practice at trying to escape under pressure, but it's not going to allow me to transition in a flowing fashion between positions. So with your Jiu-Jitsu top control, I'm going to start on the top of side control, but what I'm not allowed to do is ever latch onto you. I'm not allowed to cross-face you. I'm not allowed to grab your gi. What I am allowed to do, however, is access any lever on your body that I want. And I can put my shoulder on top of you to pin the center of your chest. So you're allowed to push off against me, bridge, hip escape, try to invert, anything you want to re-guard, and all I have to do is stay on top in a dominant position. It can be side control, I can transition into mount, knee on belly, north, south, doesn't matter. I'm just not allowed to secure the position by pinning you. I have to constantly readjust and move. I'm never able to let my chest touch your chest. I can use my shoulder, I can maybe use my hand. When I move into knee on belly, I'm not allowed to grip you, pin you down. When I move into mount, I'm not allowed to underhook you, crossface you, and grapevine you. I have to keep my weight off of you so that you're able to constantly employ any realistic bridging, hip escaping, rolling, inverting, whatever you're going to do. I have to be able to feel your reaction and respond with good timing, and that's what's going to create proficiency in these transitions, and it's going to enable me to say "F*** jiu-jitsu" one more time. Okay, now we're going to demonstrate a little bit of the jiu-jitsu type drill for top control. So the restriction for this is that my opponent can't, that I can't clamp down on my opponent, use a lot of pressure. So let's come down this for a little bit. We started side control. I'm not allowed to go chest to chest. I'm not allowed to connect my hands. My opponent's going to move through some basic recovery, escapes, and I'm going to respond with movement and lever control. We've come to the point in this volume where we're going to discuss how to finish our opponent. We just discussed using the knee on belly as a hub, which ties into some of the back attack concepts that we offer in our back attack volume, so please check that out if you get the chance. And again, we were using the knee on belly in the previous volume, or in the previous chapter rather, to address kind of a shelled up opponent who doesn't really want to play. And it's important to have avenues for dealing with very, very defensive opponents. You're going to get roles or competition matches with people who are going to try their best to actually win or actually beat you or actually try to escape a position. And then you're going to get people who break mentally and just want to shut down and not lose any harder than they're already losing. Again, in competition, I understand that. In training, don't be that guy. And I don't say this to judge anybody. I used to view things this way, and I deeply, deeply regret training this way in the past, where I just wanted to see how long I could last with someone good, or just wanted to make sure I didn't get tapped out. It does you no good. It doesn't make you any better at jiu-jitsu to lock your muscles together and not do anything. That's not jiu-jitsu. That's just the fetal position. You were born with the ability to do that. You don't need to pay anybody for classes to get there. But people do that. So our plan here is to give you some avenues of attack when somebody does just try to stay put, doesn't actually try to push away, hip escape, or anything like that. Because it is also just good defensive structure to try to deny somebody access to your limbs. So the first thing we're going to go through is how do we break someone's alignment so that we can attack their limbs in the top of side control and mount, and then how can we break someone's alignment so that we can attack their neck in those two positions. So let's start with side control. And again, if Stefan's arms are in and I attempt to go after a key lock, it's not going to work. I attempt to go after Kimura, it's not going to work. I have to do something to weaken his limbs. The first and easiest one, which we discussed earlier, which is the checkpoint, I can use that as an offensive tool. I'm going to walk back, turn Stefan's hips, and get my bicep, shoulder, anything. I'm going to create a wedge to drive in behind his elbow. Now that I've broken his base, his structure is more vulnerable, and I've separated it. I can move into my Kimura. I can duck in behind, move into arm triangles, that sort of thing. So that's our first method, is breaking base. And then the other method is breaking posture. Stefan keeps his arms really tight. I'm just going to start crushing his face until he gives me one of his arms. It's very, very difficult to survive under the bottom of heavy crossface pressure. And again, I'm going to go over the details on that crossface pressure in a second, but it's very difficult to survive under heavy crossface pressure without either turning away or pushing away to relieve the pressure. So the crossface pressure we want looks like this. I get my bicep deep under Stefan's neck. You can be on the jaw most of the time because most people are going to keep their chin tucked in, so you will be crushing their face. I want to get my fingertips into his armpit, and I want to pull back, kind of the same way if you're a huge nerd. Spider-Man shoots his web. I want to pull back and set the position this way, driving my shoulder in. Now I'm going to step my foot out at an angle Again, the reason I'm doing this is the force vector of Stefan's bridge, go ahead please, is coming up at a 45-degree angle. My post has to match the force vector, otherwise I'm not going to have effective base. So I've got a good post here to match the force vector, and then I'm going to rotate my body, driving pressure upwards, and a lot of times you're going to get taps, especially against beginners in training who don't know what to do here. You're going to get taps from either the choke or the crossface pressure, but once they feel that pressure, they're going to start to feel compelled to turn away, or they're going to start sticking their arms out. So if I get here, I start to really crush you, just to push me away. There we go. I got him to separate his limbs. And this is the easiest way to, in my opinion, deal with somebody who's being obnoxious is A, mirror their obnoxiousness with your own. Crush their fucking face. But then after they expose their limbs, snap them off for the trouble. All right, so we just showed you how to utilize broken base and broken posture to attack your opponent's arms, to get your kimuras, to get your arm bars. Once you start doing that, however, you're going to find that savvy opponents are going to respond by shutting their structure closed again, which is going to prevent the arm bar or the kimura from occurring, but it's going to create another opening, that being the neck. Marcelo Garcia is the best at the world at this, as he is the best at the world at many things, and that's creating a threat on the arms and then attacking the north-south choke. So we're just going to quickly show you how to do that, and then maybe one or two other options. So again, I find myself attempting to go for the kimura, and my opponent's just hiding his arms. I'm going to shoot my arm across, bringing my armpit back over my partner's neck. It's important that you note that my rib cage is turning Stefan's face away as I do this, and my bicep is staying tight. I'm going to walk back and start to drop my shoulder, and that should initiate the choke. All right, I'm going to do that without Stefan there, just so people can see kind of the mechanism. So as I play with my opponent's structure, they shut it down. I'm going to start to turn my hip so that I change the angle. One of the common errors here, especially if you're a long, lanky kind of weirdo, you're not going to be able to necessarily reach around like this quickly enough. By rotating your hip, you change the angle to make the grab easier. Once I've made the grab, I'm just going to keep my hand down, and I'm going to walk my ribs into my partner's face, settle my shoulder down. Key detail on finishing the north-south choke is that you actually want to walk back enough that when you drop your shoulder, you're really able to crush their neck underneath. If I just stay here, a lot of times I won't have the necessary range of motion to bring my shoulder down enough. So I want the back of my lat and my shoulder, my bicep, my forearm here to create a triangle. As I walk backwards and drop and then flex, you should be able to tap your partner with a little bit of practice with one arm. When you get to the point that you can do this with one arm, it's going to be a very reliable technique for you. The north-south choke does take some time to develop, which is why, again, using that sort of self-limitation, forcing yourself to try to perform it with one arm rather than squeezing your nuts off, it's going to enable you to develop more feel, more expertise in the technique. So I highly recommend that. It's something we do with a few different chokes at our academy. We've had excellent results with students picking up choke technique quicker. But once again, if I can bring Stefan back in, and fiddling about with his arms, he lowers them. I turn my shoulder and shoot down into the choke, covering his neck, making sure that my rib cage is pushing his face out of the way, and then I walk backwards, exposing his neck more, and then dropping my shoulder, finishing the choke.
So are you triggering here off of my head coming up as I'm trying to defend my arm?
Exactly. As soon as your head comes up, then I know there's space underneath it. If I stay in this configuration, and I'm not saying you have to do it this way, because I'm sure you're going to be able to find footage of Marcelo Garcia doing this anyway, but just a tip that's helped me a lot is turning my body to bring my arm underneath. If your head is down, you notice I wasn't able to get it, but if you start to lift your head a little bit, that's when I'm able to shoot into that catch on the north-south choke. All right, so a second option we can use, rather than going for the north-south choke, now we're going to go for a gi choke. This is a choke that we call the lawnmower choke in our club. I think some people call it a bread cutter choke, but in either case, I'm going to attack the kimura first. So again, I'm inside control. I'm working on the arms. My partner's being really diligent at hiding them. I'm going to open the collar, reach with my thumb in, and just get a grip right around the edge of my wrist against his neck. I'm going to start to drop my elbow. When I do this, if I try to reach in high, it's going to be very easy for Stefan to defend. So I'm just going to reach low like I'm starting a lawnmower. That sets the tension on the gi, and as I drop my elbow, it should allow me to get a relatively quick tap. Now, once I've established this as a threat, maybe in a training session I've tapped my partner once or twice with it, as soon as I get my arm here, they're going to start to push on my elbow. A third option now is to move into the arm lock and allow you to finish this way. So once again, we want to keep in mind the idea of attacking the arms to get to the neck. So defending structure leaves your neck open, and then attacking the neck to get to the arms. So somebody is going to open up their structure because they're protecting their neck. Alternating between these two attacking methods is going to be highly reliable, and especially when you're able to add the transitional movements that we showed earlier, you're going to create so many opportunities that your opponent should never be able to keep up with the amount of offense you're throwing at them. Again, finishing from the mount is something that we should all get good at in jiu-jitsu. You know, the last few years there's been a lot of emphasis on taking the back with all kinds of fancy stuff, which, by the way, in our following volume, Back Attacks, you can try that sort of thing. But for now, we just want to address the concept, again, of breaking someone's posture to attack their structure. So Stefan does a good job of keeping his arms in, and I'm trying to go for an armbar of some kind. It's not likely to be particularly successful. So something I want to recommend to you is anytime I find that I've got the mount and I've got a good defensive player on bottom, I'm going to come down and bend their head to the side, which is going to enable me to get underneath their elbow. Once I've got underneath the elbow, now I can start to either pursue, S-mount style armbar attacks, or in this case, we're going to go with the classic open the collar, threaten the cross choke. Threatening the cross choke causes him to bring his arm up, allows me to switch into a good S-mount and start to attack the armbar. At this point, my opponent is most likely to grab his bicep and defend. So I actually recommend, rather than trying to finish on the armbar on this side, hooking the arm here, separating this lever. And now, Stefan, try to grab your other arm. Really damn tough. I'm going to post my hand and finish the armbar on this side. All right? In my opinion, this is by far the best way to finish the armbar, just because anybody who is savvy is going to defend. And again, as we talked about with the passing transitions, if I can get you to do a predictable defense, I can seem superhumanly fast in my response. So my predictable set that I'm initiating by bending your head is that I'm going to break your structure. I'm going to threaten the cross choke. When I threaten the cross choke, you're going to bring your hand up to defend. As soon as I go for the armbar, you're going to grab your bicep, and then I've led you far enough down into a checkmate position where now I've got full access to a lever. Your posture and your structure are broken. There should be no way to defend that armbar. It's as high percentage as you're going to get. Okay, so one more time. The first thing I want to do is recognize I've got somebody who's dealing with closed elbows. I'm going to come down, start to break their posture. There's a couple of ways to do this. One is to get underneath the neck and grip the back of the triceps where it connects to the armpit. The other way is to just post your hand on the top side of their head and start jamming it forward as you slide your knee up. So I've broken posture, separated structure. I'm immediately going to open your collar, start to attack the cross choke. If you ignore me, no problem. I'm going to get my grip. I'm going to start to bow forward. I'm going to finish you off. But you're most likely to keep your arm. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to start the S-mount, forcing you to defend the armbar. As you switch from this configuration to grabbing your bicep, I'm going to take my hand out, place my biceps, triceps on the palm of your hand, accessing the end of the lever. Now I'm going to stretch your arm out, find my base on this side as I transition into the armbar with almost no possibility of defense.
Well, Rob, thank you very much for sharing with us your conceptual approach to the top position, including passing the guard and attacking from the top dominant positions. It's been a really, really interesting day filming.
My pleasure, Stefan.
I'm pretty sure this is going to help a lot of people take their game to the next level and get away from collecting another 4 attacks to submit people from side mount.
That is our ambition, is to spread this kind of conceptual jiu-jitsu as far and wide as possible, and thank you for the opportunity to share this information with everyone.
So now, you have a website. What is it?
It's islandtopteam.com.
Okay. And what about Facebook?
It's Island Top Team.
And what about YouTube?
It's actually Island Top Team.
Okay, awesome. So people can find you if they want to.
If they want to,
Yeah.
yes, they can find me at Island Top Team.
And they can come and train with you. They can come have you come down for a seminar. They can deluge you with email questions. Awesome. Take some of the load off of me.
All of those things. I love to travel for seminars. We love to have visitors at our academy, and I love answering emails because it's talking only with my fingers.
Okay.
Thanks.
Till
so
the
much.
next time, man.
Got it.